Investing and storing part of your wealth overseas are two important diversification tactics that we talk about here at Nomad Capitalist as a way to diversify against being invested in just one economy or one type of economy, against potentially being able to lower your taxes, potentially higher returns, higher growth prospects, as well as asset protection. In this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on asset protection for overseas assets. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson. If you want to learn how Nomad Capitalist helps 7- and 8-figure investors and entrepreneurs go where they're treated best through holistic offshore tax planning, immigration planning with second passports, finding the best boom markets, go to nomadcapitalist.com. One of the things that I hear from time to time from folks is, I want to make sure my assets overseas are protected. This is important. Obviously, one reason people do go overseas is asset protection. And so for some people who don't want to leave their country, their best reason for doing the stuff we talk about is not only the better investment returns, but protecting their assets. If your assets are offshore, you've got a firewall that can protect you versus just keeping some of your assets onshore. However, you don't want to get carried away. And I think a lot of the structures out there that are being sold to people, a lot of the stuff that people are paying for, is a waste or doesn't even solve the problem. Okay, now I'm from the United States. I originally grew up there, left a number of years ago, and I know growing up there that lawsuits are a big thing. People get sued for the stupidest of stuff. Businesses get sued. If you own an apartment building, you're getting sued. And, people with wealth, people who have investments, who have assets, they have a target on their back. I think that's true in a number of countries, but probably none more than the United States. But what I want to tell you about that is that you have to understand when you're going offshore that every country has its own culture, every country has its own legal system, every country has its own approach. Okay? And so if you're from the United States, I've worked with a lot of folks from the United States over the years. We'll sometimes go out in the field, we'll be looking at properties, for example, and they'll pick out things like a nail sticking out of a wall. And they'll say, what if someone impales themselves and dies on that nail? And I'll have one of my attorneys with me in that country, and they'll say, then that person is very stupid, and they deserve to die, and no one will care. Or something close to that, right? And that marks a different culture where, like, what you would get sued for in the United States isn't really an issue in a lot of places, okay? I got a comment recently I wanted to share with you because I made a video called Being James Bond is Not the Goal. Because I think that when you look at asset protection, you've got a couple different camps offshore. One camp is, again, largely Americans, but also other people who are just concerned because they know how things work in their country. They want to be protected. The other camp are folks who they look at the offshore world as a way to gain some intrigue and have something interesting in their life. And I get that. I think it's, this international lifestyle can be really cool. But you don't want to, use a bunch of expensive structures and asset protection measures just to be cool. And so the commenter said, nailed it again, Andrew. The James Bond attitude with sunglasses behind sunglasses is what so many people go for without logically looking at the cost-benefit analysis. Are you really at risk for being sued? What's the court system like where you own property or have assets? How liable to damages really are you if someone slips and falls in your Airbnb? Don't make your life harder than it has to be. That's the message that dictates my perspective on offshore asset protection. I don't tell people never have a trust, but I do think that trusts are often overprescribed. Had a guy recently who came to me. He hired a company to establish a trust, paid them a bloody fortune. They didn't even establish the trust in the jurisdiction they agreed to. They kind of shifted and bobbed and weaved. He eventually came to me. We're solving the problem. I said, I don't think you need a trust. This just seems like an expensive thing someone sold you to kind of rack up a bill. Like, do you want fries with that? No, I just want the hamburger. And so I think you don't want to do it overseas because you have to consider the local culture. You have to understand, am I really going to have the same issues in this other country? Okay. Now, this is not legal advice. Okay. If someone comes to me with legitimate asset protection issues, I've got guys that do asset protection. We're going to involve them in our holistic international planning. But to me, simply having an asset offshore is a firewall in and of itself. Right? Having money in an offshore bank account having a property overseas, having precious metals overseas, any kind of asset overseas, having a business overseas that may or may not give you tax benefits. I'm not saying that no one can ever take your assets. I think that having a structure where like no one can ever under any circumstances take your assets, that's rather difficult to obtain. But the reality is 99% of people, let's say in the United States, they don't have their assets offshore. So you're already ahead of 99% of people just by taking some very simple steps. And so the question is, do you need to go 99.9%, 99.9, 0.99, 0.99999? You know, how much more advanced do you need to be? Sometimes being offshore is just, that's just enough, okay? And what I see is a lot of countries where you go and invest overseas, having your assets in a company puts you at a disadvantage from a tax perspective. It may subject you in some European countries to VAT. It may subject you to more paperwork. It's certainly going to require you in a number of countries, if you have a company structure, now you have to take a director's salary. That salary is going to be taxed. You've got to file monthly tax returns, all to own one piece of property, right? One market I've talked about for a long time that's not in Europe is Cambodia. I've been a big advocate of Cambodia for 7 or 8 years now. Read an Investation talks a lot about Cambodia. And what's happening in Cambodia is it's become very difficult for the average foreigner to go and buy the best value apartments in their own name. You can buy condos, which are generally more expensive, but if you want to buy the best deals, you need to have a Cambodian company, or you need to be a Cambodian citizen. And so unless you're going to go out and buy, as Reed does, you know, entire apartment buildings, it's not worth it to have a Cambodian company to buy your one little apartment because it comes with monthly filings, right? You have to actually make it a business, not just hold the real estate. Now, does having a Cambodian company versus owning a property in your own name in Cambodia really protect your assets that much more? From a Cambodian perspective, no, it doesn't. And I would even argue that in the United States, I've seen cases where someone had their assets in the United States in a foreign trust, and they thought that foreign trust would protect them. The challenge is, if the judge in the United States decides we're going to take this asset, screw the foreign trust, then you haven't achieved the benefit that you wanted to. And so, you know, overall, when it comes to asset protection overseas, all I want to stress is understand countries operate differently. Most countries that we talk about are not nearly as litigious. I'm not saying don't protect yourself. Maybe you want to buy an insurance policy in some of these countries. Maybe in some countries a corporate structure could work. But when it comes to corporate structures owned by trusts, owned by this, a lot of times, and in almost all my experience, you know, working with folks at the 6, 7, 8, 9, and occasionally even 10-figure level, very rarely is it needed. And in fact, some of the folks, the wealthiest people that I've seen and that I've worked with have actually relatively simple structures, because they understand this principle that you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to cause yourself, you know, big paperwork strain, especially in a new country where you don't have a lot of experience, and it may not really even solve your problem. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.